It was a dark and stormy night when I found myself walking through the cemetery. I had always been curious about the place, but never had the guts to go there alone. But tonight, I felt brave. I had just broken up with my girlfriend and needed a place to clear my bed. As I walked through the rows of gravestones, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. The wind was howling and the trees were creaking. It was as if the entire cemetery was alive and trying to tell me something. I tried to ignore this feeling and continued walking. But then I heard something. It was a low, guttural growl. I froze in my tracks, not sure what to do. I turned around, and that's when I saw it. It was a figure standing in the distance, shrouded in mist. It was tall and slender, with glowing red eyes. I couldn't distinguish its features, but could tell it was not human. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. The figure started moving towards me, and I knew I had to run. I turned and sprinted away, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I ran, I heard something chasing me, and it was the sound of footsteps, heavy and menacing. I didn't dare look back, and I just kept running until I stumbled and fell. When I looked up, the figure stood right before me. It was tall and gaunt, with skin as white as bone. Its eyes were deep, soulless black, and its teeth were razor sharp. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure reached on its hand and touched my forehead. I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through my body, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground in the cemetery. The storm had passed, and the moon was shining bright in the sky. I tried to get up, but I felt weak and disorientated. It was like something had drained all the energy out of me. As I stumbled through the cemetery, I noticed something strange. All the gravestones were different, all the same shape and size, with no names or dates. It was as if they were all waiting for someone to fill them in. I heard footsteps behind me and turned around, and it was the figure from before, standing in the distance. It beckoned me with its hand, and I knew I had to follow. As I approached the figure, I realized it wasn't a monster, it was Death, the Grim Reaper himself. And he had come to take me to the other side. I didn't want to go, but knew I had no choice. Death took my hand and led me through the cemetery. We walked for what felt like hours, until we reached a dark, empty void. Death pushed me forward, and I fell into the void. I could feel myself falling for what felt like an eternity. And then, I hit the ground. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the cemetery. It was daytime now, and the sun was shining. I looked down at my hands and saw that they were skeletal, and I was a ghost, trapping in the cemetery forever. And then I heard a voice. It was my ex-girlfriend's voice. She was calling out my name, trying to find me, but I couldn't respond. I was trapped. From that day on, I haunted the cemetery. I watched as people came and went, their lives fleeting and temporary, but I'm stuck, a permanent resident of the cemetery. I never really believed in ghosts. I thought that they were just made-up stories to scare kids. But it all changed when I visited that cemetery. It was a sunny day, and I was walking through the cemetery with my friends. We were joking around, taking pictures of the gravestones and trying to scare each other. But as we wandered deeper into the cemetery, things started to get strange. I began to feel like we were not alone and were being watched. Every time I turned around, I saw shadows moving behind the gravestones. My friends didn't notice anything, but I knew something was wrong. As we walked further into the cemetery, I heard strange whispers. It sounded like a group of people was chanting in some unknown language. I told my friends what I was hearing, but they laughed and said it was probably just the wind. But I knew that it wasn't just the wind. The whispers grew louder and more intense as we approached the large, ominous-looking mausoleum. I didn't want to go there, but my friends insisted we check it out. We pushed open the heavy stone door and stepped inside. The air inside the mausoleum was cold and damp, and an eerie silence filled the air. As we walked through the dark corridors, I felt like we were being watched by something. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise coming from behind us. It sounded like a heavy metal door slamming shut. My friends didn't seem to notice anything, but I knew something was wrong. I turned around and saw that the door we had just walked through was now sealed shut. We were trapped inside the mausoleum. Panic set in as we searched for another way out, but every door and window was locked tight. That's when we started to see them. Ghostly figures began to appear in the darkness, moving closer and closer to us. They were all dressed in old-fashioned clothing, and they had the look of anger on their faces. I realized that we had stumbled upon something evil. These were the restless spirits of the dead, and they were angry that we had disturbed their resting place. I knew we had to find a way out of there quickly. We ran through the dark corridors trying to find an escape. But the ghosts were right behind us, chasing us through the maze of the mausoleum. We were lost and had no idea what to do and how to get out. Just when we thought that all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a secret passage. We pushed open a hidden door and found ourselves in a small room filled with ancient artifacts. We didn't have time to explore though. We could hear the ghosts getting closer and closer. We crawled through the small passage and emerged outside, gasping for breath. The sun was setting, and we could see that the cemetery was now surrounded by fog. We knew that we had to get out of there and fast. We ran as fast as we could, not daring to look back. We finally reached the edge of the cemetery and collapsed in exhaustion. I knew I would never forget what I saw in that mausoleum. The ghosts were real, and they were angry. From that day on, I never went back to that cemetery, but every time I drove past it, I could still feel the presence of something evil. The cemetery may be a place of rest for the dead, but it's also a place of fear for the living. And I know that I will never forget what I saw that day, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. I always thought cemeteries were creepy, But that old cemetery in Paris that I found on Google Maps while visiting Paris was on another level. When I first stepped into the cemetery, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. The gravestones were so old and worn, many of them were barely legible. But there was one grave that caught my eye, and it was different from the others. It was a small, unassuming grave tucked away in the corner, but it had fresh flowers on it, which was strange considering how old the grave was. I couldn't help but feel drawn to it, so I approached it. As I got closer, I noticed that the name on the grave was my own. I was shocked and scared. How could there be a grave with my name on it? Was I going to die soon? Suddenly I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned around but couldn't see anyone. I started running but couldn't find my way out of the cemetery. It was like the graves were moving and changing places, trapping me inside. Finally, after what felt like hours, I stumbled upon the entrance. But as I was leaving, I heard a voice whisper my name. I turned around and saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a woman, but she was transparent like a ghost. She beckoned me to come closer, but I was too scared to come. She beckoned me to come closer, but I was too scared to move. That's when I woke up, drenched in sweat. It was just a dream, but it felt so real. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that cemetery. The next day, I decided to do some research on that old cemetery in Paris. I learned that it was one of the oldest cemeteries in the city, and that many famous people were buried there. But there were also rumors of strange occurrences and sightings of ghosts. I couldn't help but feel drawn back to the cemetery as if it was calling to me. So I returned that night, armed with a flashlight and my bravery. Walking through the rows of graves, I felt like I was being watched again. But this time I didn't run. I approached the grave with my name on it again, but this time it was different. The flowers were wilted and there was a strange smell in the air. As I looked around, I saw that the other graves had changed too. They were newer and fresher, and their names were familiar. They were the names of people I knew who were still alive. That's when I knew something was wrong. I tried to leave, but the graves surrounded me again. I was trapped, and I knew I wasn't alone. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. I was panicking now. I couldn't breathe. But then I heard a voice, a familiar voice. It was my grandmother who had passed away years ago. She told me to calm down and that everything would be okay. She said that I needed to leave the cemetery and never come back. I woke up again, but I was in a hospital bed this time. The doctors told me that I had a panic attack and had been found unconscious in the cemetery. But I knew what had happened, and I had been visited by the ghosts of the old cemetery in Paris. I've never gone back to that cemetery or any other cemetery, and I never will. Every night I hear the whispers of the dead calling my name. Please, help me. Thank you for listening to our story. I hope it gave you a good scare. If you like our story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more spooky stories like this one.